This is a station identification moment. You're listening to CPR Worldwide Media, a division of CPR Media Network, coming to you live right across the planet. Check out our website at www.cprworldwidemedia.com and our Facebook page at facebook.com/CPR Worldwide Media. This is CPR Media Network, coming to you live from the USA.
Well, looky here, a new listener. Hey, this ain't your little sister's radio station.
Why do cities shine so bright? It's the glow of opportunities, of ideas bouncing off one another, of countless people, every one of us, striving to succeed. Right now, in cities everywhere, ideas are being born. New thinking that will put us in awe of what people are capable of. That's what lights cities up, and helping people and their ideas to burn even brighter, so that communities, businesses, and you and I can grow. What if a bank made that its job? For more than 200 years, Citi's job has been to help empower people and business. Now, around the world, it's wherever people gather, wherever ideas come alive. It's wherever you are. The world's city.
It's not about how many miles you can get out of the C-Max Hybrid. It's about how much life you can fit into it. The Ford C-Max Hybrid, with an EPA estimated range of 540 miles on a tank of gas, and all the room you need to enjoy the trip. Go stretch out. Go further.
However dark the night, however dim our hopes, the light is always there within you.
His family gave him hope.
You fight harder than those other guys, and you win.
His spirit gave him strength.
We're gonna die out here.
We're not dying!
And in his darkest hour,
who is the Olympic athlete?
His faith would not be broken.
Hello, Mother and Father. This will be the first time in 2 years that you'll have heard my voice. I wish you all a Merry Christmas. Your loving son, Louis.
On Christmas Day, experience the unbelievable true story of one man's journey home.
You can take it. You can make it. Just gotta believe you can.
If I can take it, I can make it.
Unbroken, rated PG-13, Christmas Day. The moment you connect, you're no longer in control.
What does this guy want?
No claim, no statement.
We're facing a nuclear meltdown.
This is only the beginning. Black Hat, rated R.
Read something recently worth thinking about. It's the soldier, not the campus organizer, who's given us freedom to demonstrate. It's the soldier, not the reporter, who's given us freedom of the press. It's the soldier, not the poet, who's given us freedom of speech. It's the soldier who serves under the flag, who defends the protesters' right to burn the flag. Isn't it time now to demonstrate that we support our troops? Were it not for the brave, there'd be no land of the free.
Fred Thompson's message was brought to you by citizensunited.org.
Welcome to the State Legislators Roundtable. Your host will be Charles Kacprowicz, Executive Director of Citizen Initiatives and Countermand Amendment. Our special legislator guests will be discussing important issues in their states that relate to federal encroachment on states' rights. The nonpartisan Article 5 single-issue countermand amendment can remedy many states' issues peacefully without the consent of Congress, the courts, or the executive branch. We will reclaim our constitutional republic soon. The nonpartisan countermand amendment is the missing piece of the Article 5 puzzle. Our nation is coming apart at the seams, so we are countermanding.
Good evening, folks. Welcome to the State Legislators Roundtable. I am Charles Kacprowicz, Executive Director for Citizen Initiatives and the Countermand Amendment. The roundtable that we have each Tuesday and Friday. On Tuesdays it's at 9 p.m. tonight, and on Fridays it's at 8 p.m. But it's for discussions with state legislators and community leaders centered around critical issues in the states as they relate to federal encroachment on states' rights and how the nonpartisan Countermand Amendment can remedy many of them safely and quickly. This is not a gotcha forum. We're not here to back our guests into a corner. We do encourage serious discussions of issues important to our guests and their states as they relate to federal encroachment. Some of the subjects we've already covered include taxation, criminal law, energy policies, health care, social issues, federal land grabs, court decisions, education, executive orders, unfunded liabilities, EPA, BLM, IRS, and much more. You will learn how to protect your enumerated rights in the Constitution and how the states and their citizens can identify, define, and protect their unenumerated rights in the 9th and 10th Amendments, peacefully and permanently. The roundtable members tonight include Sandy Toth, our Executive Coordinator and Georgia State Director. Excuse me. Also, Kelly Gordon, our National Coordinator and Texas State Director, and also our producer. And I, Charles Kacprowicz, am your host. We now have 15, and I think we're going to have 16 states for the nonpartisan Article 5 Countermand Amendment. That will be, I should say, 16 sponsored states for the nonpartisan Article 5 Countermand Amendment. We could have a total of 20 sponsored states in the near future. We've had the honor of meeting many of the country's leading legislators on the State Legislators Roundtable, and I see these legislators more as statesmen than politicians. They are trying to find solutions to the many problems their citizens face, especially as they relate to overreach by the federal government. We are growing. We now estimate that we have well over 100,000 listeners every week, and we expect to see that even grow more. We are one of the fastest growing internet talk shows on radio. You can learn more about the Countermand Amendment by going to countermands.us. That is countermands with an S.us. Also, invite your friends and relatives and associates to listen to our program tonight. Ask them to go to cprworldwidemedia.com/live-radio/. That's cprworldwidemedia.com/live-radio. If you care to call in and you have a comment and a question for our guest, in a moment I'll be introducing our guest tonight. You can do so by calling 956-217-0031. That's 956-217-0031. Now, we are going to introduce our guest tonight. We have a special guest who's become a very special friend to Citizen Initiatives and the work that we are doing in the Countermand Amendment Initiative, and her name is Virginia Schloret. And as I said, she is our special guest. She is a patriot. She endeavors to restore our republic with the Countermand Amendment and other activities that she's involved with. Tonight she will share with our listeners her vision for America and how we can reclaim our heritage. Virginia is a commercial and residential real estate broker working in Seattle, Washington. She has 17 years experience as the sole owner and CEO of a development property management holding company in Washington State. Included among her many talents and experiences are she has been a freelance paralegal, worked in the Washington State Legislature in the Office of Program Research. She has had 5 years of concentrated studies at City University, UW Evergreen State College, and she graduated from ITT School of Business. So, Having said that introduction, Virginia, we welcome you to the show, and you feel free to share anything that's on your mind and any comment or question you want to make. We're going to be here to try to help you. And we're just going to have a round table tonight and enjoy the conversation dealing with the constitutional republic that we're all concerned with and love. So welcome, Virginia, to our show.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you very much for that nice introduction. And it's my pleasure to be here. I've been working with Kelly Gordon for approximately 3 to 4 months on the Countermand Amendment, and when I was introduced to it, I was completely sold with it, whereas I was not sold at all on the Convention of States model that's being promoted by Mark Levine, because I don't believe that we need another D.C. And that's the circumstances as I see it with Convention of States, in that there's multiple issues that will be negotiated at the same time, which is going to result in a corruption of the process, the same as what has happened in D.C., and we will get progressives and communists and elitists and lobbyists and people who don't have the best intention for our republic at heart. And whereas with the Countermand Amendment, I was completely sold because it's single-issue conventions, and to me, that is the only way to govern our nation, and it's the only way that we can be absolutely assured that the processes will not be taken over again by our enemies of state as they are now.
Well,
I'm very... Yeah, go ahead, Charles.
I couldn't agree with you more, and in fact, you sound like you've been with us for many years. We understand what you're saying, and what you're saying is absolutely essential for understanding what Article 5 is all about. I do also enjoy your enthusiasm. The fact is that you have introduced us to a lot of people across the country who have already joined us, and it really is a pleasure to know you. You've been a wonderful supporter, and I'm honored to be your friend on this show.
Well, thank you, Charles. And I just want to let the listeners know that I've been on Facebook. That's been the medium that I've chosen to use because there's so many patriots on Facebook. So I've been on Facebook for about 6 years, and I have 2 IDs, and I've made about 8,500 patriot friends. And I do a lot of posting. I'm kind of like a little newspaper. I figure that what we have is the alternative press. We don't have a mainstream media. We've got a few different, Fox, and once in a while, half the time or whatever. We don't really have a mainstream media, so it's critical that we have an alternative media. So that's what I've been doing over the past 5-6 years, and I've made a lot of very close friends, and it's my honor to bring people who trust me and know me into this, get them involved, and people are very, very excited about saving this country, and I believe that this is the only way we can save this country. D.C. is broken. D.C. is corrupted, and I don't see any hope for D.C., and I think that with the Countermand Amendment, that within a year, we can have it in place and we can be passing legislation with single-issue conventions, and eventually, I believe that we can phase D.C. out. It may take 10 years. But I believe we can pretty much phase out Congress.
Well, the fact is
what I call the People's Congress.
What we see coming is let me rephrase that. One of the big problems that we have when we have a good candidate, he gets elected, which is not very often, and we send him to D.C., whether as a congressman or a senator. The fact is that he finds himself either so overwhelmed with what has happened in D.C. organizationally within Congress, and within the administration, or he becomes corrupted himself. And so the outcome of that is that it never changes. I have never believed that politics by itself is our answer. I have always believed that sovereignty is the core to this nation's problems, and the sovereignty is going to have to be what the state legislatures have in Article 5. And we certainly can talk about more of that in a moment. But at any rate, I understand what you have said about D.C., and I agree 100%.
Yes. And, my question to you, because you've been studying this for, 40 years? You've been, preparing for this moment in time? Has it been 40 years that you've been?
That is true. I have
wow.
I have been working on amendments to the U.S. Constitution, advancing them either through Congress or state legislatures under Article 5 for 40 years. That is correct. I've worked with many, many wonderful, wonderful congressmen before Congress turned out to be an organization that is unresponsive to everything. But men like Senator Strom Thurmond in South Carolina, he became a wonderful advocate for us, tried very hard to help us in the Senate. And every time I communicated with that man, he responded with a personal response within days. He didn't hesitate to let me know that he was supporting me with the advancement of the amendments. At that point, it was an amendment called the Unborn Child Amendment. But also Jesse Helms, Senator Helms in North Carolina, was a big, big help to me. But the problem was they could not, even with their clout, persuade enough senators and congresspeople to advance an amendment from Congress so that ratification was possible. And then gradually we found ourselves, through our studies and legal experience, constitutional experience, moving into the area of Article 5 through state legislatures, bypassing Congress. And that has become the focus of my attention now. And the Countermand Amendment, there are two amendments that are especially dear to me. One is the Sovereignty Amendment, and the people will be hearing about that very shortly. And the other one is the Countermand Amendment. And the Countermand Amendment is the one that we're talking about tonight.
Correct. Yes, and so as I understand it, once we get 34 states, the legislatures thereof, meaning 51% of the House and the Senate of each of those states, to basically ratify it or agree and pass it, then we have a countermand amendment to the Constitution. And then at that point, we need 38 states to pass legislation in the individual single-issue conventions.
Well, almost correct. You've got the numbers right, but the applications are a little bit different than you just stated. The Constitution provides the country to amend. The Constitution under Article 5 allows the Constitution to be amended through Congress or through the state legislatures. And how it works is if it goes through Congress, then 2/3 of both houses in Congress have to approve a specific amendment. Now, we have right now 27 amendments to our Constitution. 11 of them were actually the Bill of Rights. We often hear about the Bill of Rights being 10. And that was true up until 1992. That's when the 11th member in the list that was the Bill of Rights was ratified by the states dealing with compensation limitations on the Senate. But the fact is that when Congress approves with 2/3 of both houses an amendment that they want on the Constitution, then they send that amendment to the states and the states have to ratify it. Now that says a couple of things for us. One of which is Congress doesn't control the amendment process. The states do, regardless of which mode of ratification and amendment, whichever, let me rephrase that, no matter which amendment process you're using. But when Congress sends that amendment to the states, they still have to ratify it. And then 38 states need to ratify. And it isn't 38 per se, it's 3/4 of the states. And that's, right now, comes to 38. But when there's an egregious wrong suffered by the people, and the federal government refuses to address that, the legislatures of 1787, with the wisdom of the founders, gave us the alternate method by which to amend the Constitution, and that's through state legislatures. Now, in that process, the state legislatures apply to Congress, and when 2/3 of the states make application for a specific convention for proposing amendments, which is the limitation in Article 5, then Congress is obliged and they have to convene that convention. Then, when the convention approves a particular amendment, whichever amendment it may be, then the convention sends it back to the states through Congress. Now, Congress has one more option here. But remember something, that Congress is the facilitator. They have been ordained or appointed by the founders to facilitate the process from proposal to application to ratification in an orderly fashion. They're not to control the convention process. Congress is not the controller. the state legislatures are, especially through the convention process. So when Congress is given the approved amendment, it then sends it back to the states for ratification all over again. It facilitates the process. Now, Congress has one option here that the states have to agree to, and that is how the amendment is to be ratified. It can be ratified at the option of Congress through the state legislatures, which in that case, then 3/4 of the state legislatures approve it, ratify it, and it becomes part of the Constitution. Or Congress can say, we want this to be approved through state legislatures, kind of like the Convention of States idea that we hear so much about. And then the state legislatures, not individuals in the state, control that convention. And then they send the delegates as ambassadors to that convention for the purpose of approving the amendment for ratification. And when that happens, it becomes part of the Constitution, but 3/4 of those state conventions have to approve it. So it's a little bit of a convoluted process, but at the same time, it's extremely important that we understand Congress is the facilitator. There are so many people out there that are saying that somehow Congress controls things. They do not control it. As long as the states meet what is required in the Constitution for an orderly process, such as 2/3 of the states' legislatures applying for a specific amendment to convene a convention, as long as that happens, Congress can't refuse. They have to convene the convention. And when they convene the convention, then the states send delegates, and those delegates are the ones that vote on it. But what I'd like to talk about a little bit tonight, when after you make some comments here, Virginia, is what happens at the convention? What are the problems that we have to face at the convention, and how do we address those problems? But at any rate, that's the process that is needed to be followed, and the Congress is a facilitator, not the controller. And I like that idea. And one of the reasons why it makes so much sense is the state legislatures in 1787, and then when they ratified the new Constitution in 1791, the state legislatures created the federal government. They created not only the Constitution, but the federal government that was to be held together by the Constitution. The federal government did not create the state legislatures. And because the state legislatures were sovereign then as nation states in a republic under the Articles, they retained that sovereignty in Article 5. The only thing that did in order to prevent a gridlock, which was a problem under the Articles of Confederation, it required the states to have unanimous consent on amendments to the Articles of Confederation. That's one of the reasons why we almost lost the Revolutionary War and even the peace afterwards, because the states wouldn't cooperate. One state could hold the other 12 hostage. But what they did is that sovereignty they retained, and they passed it on to future generations of legislatures represented by their citizens or elected by their citizens, and it's in Article 5. But they limited it to the purpose of proposing amendments. There is no such thing as a constitutional convention under Article 5. Can't happen. It's for proposing an amendment. On the other hand, when they did this, they gave the states the sovereign authority to decide what type of convention they want, how do they organize it, and so forth and so on. So those are the steps that have to be followed, and remembering that the Congress is simply the facilitator.
Yes, and as I understand it, the President of the United States doesn't even need to sign these amendments.
That is correct, Virginia. The President has absolutely no say under Article 5. Now, he may have some political influence on the state legislatures or Congress, if it's under that first process whereby Congress proposes the amendment to the states, but he has no authority. And thank God for that, because he can't enter his political realm or his political power in this realm. And they also, the Article 5 doesn't allow the governor of the state to have any influence, and not influence, but control over the amendment process. It's simply in the state legislatures. Now, there's also been a lot of confusion as to what that means. as far as the people being represented. You'll hear in many quarters, well, if just the state legislatures are agreeing to convene a convention, then surely they would appoint and send delegates from the citizenry who would then represent the people. And then they would be the representatives of the state at the convention. That's nonsense. The fact is the state legislatures represent the people. They were elected by the people. And because the people are the ones with the sovereign authority to elect the legislators in the legislature, the process is very clearly in favor of state legislatures exercising the will of the citizen. And because the state legislatures were elected to be the deliberative body, they don't need third parties who aren't even in the Constitution to decide what's to happen.